All right. So we should be live right now. If you guys can let me know if you can hear me and see me okay. Hope everyone is doing well out there tonight. So I'll wait just to for you guys to let me know that we're up and running. And I'm sure it'll take a few minutes for people to find the video. I initially listed it for tomorrow, but meant to list it for today. In the meantime, hey Chevels, Christian Diaz, Bryce Miller, Colson, and Kai. Nice to see all of you. I hope all of you are doing well and having a good night so far, or a good day. I guess people are also in different time zones. So let's see. So this video was really inspired. It's something I've wanted to talk about more specifically for a while. And I've thought about making just sort of, a non-live version of it that's sort of shorter and more digestible for people than a long conversation. But, I'll put it in the beginning, which will be easier for people to access. But I wanted to, someone in the comment section of my last video asked for a follow-up to kind of more specifically go into, how one does value cards, Pokemon cards, honestly, stocks, real estate, anything, and to kind of go into more specifics. Maybe I'll try to do some examples in this video, but really walk you through my thought process for what it's worth and what has been successful for me, and what I have a lot of faith in this process, and I think that this process is anyone can do this process, and I would encourage that if they want to be an investor in anything in the world. So the first thing that you really want to do is, before looking into and you can weave some of this in a little bit, here and there, but even before looking into the price history, the exact population reports, anything about a specific card, where I like to start is just sort of quieting myself a little bit. And I ask myself just a simple question and I try to check in with myself, and I say, what do I think this item is worth? Let me block out all the noise, all of my friends' opinions, all of the influencer opinions, everyone's opinions, both negative and positive. And there are a boatload of negative and positive opinions for everything. And start by just saying, okay, I have this card, in front of me. What would I pay for this card in my life? Not from an investment perspective of like trying to make money off it. I'm going to resell it. I'm going to flip it. I'm going to make money off of it. That's not what value investing is about. Value investing is this item undervalued to me in terms of my enjoyment and appreciation. Money has a certain amount of value to every person, which I think is a good way to start to talk a little bit about money. And your money, and this is broadly true about investing in general, your money can do a lot of things for you. You have a lot of options with your money. Generally, your money, for most people, not everyone, which people can use credit cards and other sorts of things dangerously for this, but for most people, their money first is being spent on their rent, on food, on, maybe some more critical, physiological need type items and resources to kind of keep their life steady, gas bills, paying for gas in your car, things that allow you to get to work, come back to work, these types of things. And so when we think about how much and I'll grab a Pokemon card. Let's just grab a random Pokemon card. What's a good one? What's a decently priced? Let's take this one. Take it out of its sleeve here. And I think it'll be good to give an actual example. And I'll talk. We'll really go into just it's a random card. It just happens to be here. We'll take this this card here. Okay, so this is Articuno EX from Plasma Storm. In a PSA 9. And so when I look at this card, the first thing I think to myself is okay, if I didn't already own this card and I wanted to buy it and I'm trying to value it and think about, how valuable is this card to me? What you're really doing is you're actually thinking about, okay, how much extra money do I have in my life? And what are all of my options for my money? And once I go through that thought process, how much money do I then have left over once I've spent it on things that I value more than this card? And then how much money of that leftover would I be willing to spend on this card versus maybe a variety of other entertainment items, a variety of other Pokemon cards or cards from different TCGs and CCGs? This is actually the thought process that's going to go into anyone buying any card in the hobby, generally speaking, okay? And it's a really important place to start with, because why I invested so heavily into Pokemon a few years ago was because I started with sort of the fundamentals of, okay, how much money, and this is where you take the next step. So once you figured out how much you can pay, you would pay personally for an item like this based on how cool you think the art is. Maybe we start to sprinkle in here a little bit of, history, understanding which set this is from, understanding the price of the booster box, understanding the rarity, which can provide some excitement. It's kind of cool to own an item that's maybe a little bit old, that's a little bit hard to pull, that would be very expensive to pull. All that stuff will be factored into an analysis for any individual if they're very engaged in the Pokemon market and they have a lot of knowledge about a card like this. And I can show you and talk as we go. A lot of people here will know and have resources for looking up all of those things. But, a lot of us also just kind of have at this point it in our heads. I have a rough idea of the population report. I have a rough idea of sort of the price history and a rough idea of the booster box price and rough enough to kind of make some sort of value assessment. Okay. So for me, if I have $100,000 in excess money versus $1 million in excess money versus $200 in excess money, my answer on what to value this card is going to dramatically shift for me personally. And this is a really important thing to understand and concept to understand, because what we're about to do is we're about to move our value assessment from this card to what we think the broader market would likely value it. Okay. And once you answer those things, or you try and think about those things. So because the answer is, if you had $1 million, for a lot of people here, they'd probably be willing, just for their own enjoyment, if they had an extra $1 million that they were constantly getting in, there'd be a lot of cards, maybe including this one or other cards, that they'd be willing to buy, at market right now, or even probably higher than market, because they really like the card. They really enjoy and appreciate the card. They're not buying it to speculate. And now that they have excess money, now that they have a lot more money, this is a place that they would put their money for entertainment and for enjoyment. Okay. I think a lot of people are in that boat. So 3 years ago, my thought process, particularly with, Wizards of the Coast stuff, was, okay, a card like this would have been $12 to $15 back then. A card like this, I think, was going for maybe $300 back then, $400. I think maybe 500-ish, 300 to 500. Depends when, like 2006, 17, you're probably more towards like the 350, 400. 2019, 2020, you're looking more at like 500, 600 is my memory. Okay. So at 500 to 600 back then, or 400, you're looking at a card that, for me, is a really cool card, and I'll explain. Now, this doesn't mean that it's a really cool card for everyone out there, but for me, I look at this card and I think, okay, you know, these are these really cool secret rares that are shining, that have this unique hollow pattern that didn't exist in the hobby up until this point. The first shining cards, these Neo Destiny first edition boxes are extremely expensive. Even back then they were way more expensive than actually just buying the card. And at that time, there might have been, at the top of my head, there might have been maybe, gosh, this part I don't 100% remember. I want to say maybe 200-ish tens, 150 to 200 tens. We could look up the popper part right now. I remember the other one's a little bit better for some reason than this one. But let's say it was 200, okay? So, or 150. It's probably a little bit less back then. 150, 125, whatever. At $400 to $500, now I start to think, okay, how many people in the world right now or in the next few years do I think are going to have some sort of similar connection to me with this card and have an extra, $400 or $500 that they'd be willing to spend on an item with sort of the fundamentals that a card like this has? And I would say the fundamentals of this is like first shiny, it's Raichu, it's a popular Pokemon, unique art style, hard, difficult to pull, among the first secret rares in the hobby, right? And at that price point, my theory at the time was, I think that there will be a lot. When I looked at the Pokemon company and I said, well, the IP is the biggest IP ever on planet Earth. Okay. I looked over at comic books, and I looked over at the sports cards, and I looked over at some Magic and Alpha stuff. And I looked and I did research on other markets to see what prices of items that I thought were comparable to this, sort of in importance, in general rarity, and also scarcity, like how many are on the market. And then I came to the conclusion that this and pretty much everything, and I was, buying up everything in doubles and triples of as many of these things as possible back then. I came to a conclusion that I thought that this was very undervalued, and that over the next 3, 5, 10, 15 years, probably there were going to be a lot more people on planet Earth who had a similar value assessment to me, and I felt like I was there early. And so because of that, I viewed it as an investment potential, not because the prices were going up, and prices had been flat or down on these items, right? So a lot of people talk about, if prices are going up, it means a good investment. That's not a good way to invest. A good way to invest is to actually look at the item and say, do I think that there will be enough people in this world who will really want this item and cherish this item, really enjoy this item, not be buying it for a flip, but be buying it because they really appreciate and enjoy the item at that price. And then what price do I think that could be? And then you add in the demographics. You say, well, I think, and this is very important, I think that in the future, there will be multiple generations of people in Pokemon, and there's going to be a lot more people in Pokemon. There's going to be 100 millionaires in Pokemon who are buying cards. There's going to be 50 millionaires. There's going to be 10 millionaires. There's going to be, multi-millionaires. There's going to be people with 500,000. There's going to be people who are making lots of people are going to be making $70,000 to $150,000 a year in salary, who probably every year will spend, a few $1,000s net, in the hobby. And when there's only 120 of this, and now there are lots of cards that I would say are a similar sort of thing of this, but let's say there were, 5,000 in the pop of something that I would put sort of in this class from the vintage stuff. If you do a market cap analysis where you say, okay, let's multiply 5,000, times what the value of this is going, do I think that there's going to be, a few $1 million worth of interest for every Wizards of the Coast vintage card? A few years ago with $3 million, you could own, outside of like first edition based PSA 10s, maybe in Charizards and booster boxes, like some of those were already expensive. We're talking, $35,000, $40,000. Those would add up really quick. But so many cards within this range, you could have bought every single one of them for just a few $1 million. And that didn't seem sustainable. That seemed like way too little for these items that were extremely beautiful and engaging to me. And I felt that a lot of people would feel that way over time, and that the price point seemed so low that it felt like a really strong investment. And I didn't care that everyone was saying negative things about the market and everyone was saying, and no one was really, I don't really think any, or not very many people, there were zero investment channels going on. There was no invest in Pokemon, and I was on E4 and other places typing things and saying things. Eventually, once I stopped lurking, I can't believe how cheap all these items are, because it just doesn't make sense based on how much I enjoy and appreciate Pokemon, based on how many of these cards exist in the world, particularly in these high grades and the overall prices. Okay. Now, let's look at this card now. Now this card is about $2,800, probably lowest listed-ish on eBay, something like that. $2,900, maybe $3,000, okay? Now, that's a lot more. How many people do I think have $3,000 that now, if everyone in this chat was multimillionaires, there'd probably be a lot of people here who would buy this card and who want this card. And so as people get more wealthy and as time goes on and there's more money in the hobby, if that grows, it's very possible that this card could continue to go up. Okay. And that there aren't enough for the supply to go around. However, at $3,000, your value analysis has to radically change from its $600 if you think critically about how many people you think in the world can. It's not about wanting the card, but it's about wanting and then being able to afford it at $3,000, and really are wanting it and affording it, not for stonking and FOMO, which is what was driving up the prices before. Lots of people were buying things not because they really wanted them for these prices, not because they really appreciated them, not because they were really collectors, but because they didn't understand the value. They were getting terrible advice, and there was a lot of greed and FOMO, and people were trying to make money, and market manipulation, all sorts of things were going on. Okay, don't listen to the emotion and the feelings and the noise. Follow the numbers, follow the rationality, and do the type of value assessment I just did on anything in any card that you're going to buy. Now, there is wide speculation involved in this, because how do I know how many people in the world there are going to be who are going to want this card at these higher prices? You can't possibly know, which is part of the risk of investing and speculating in these markets that you will never get over. But what you can do is you can compare it to other hobbies and hobbies that have more established price points. And there are plenty of comic things like comic books and things like, sports cards and toys, action figures, memorabilia, fit from pop culture stuff that I would put in sort of the same class as this, but come from older franchises, older IPs that have been around longer and are going for considerably more than this, or now sort of around the same amount. So do I think at 3,000, this is a really good investment right now? I personally do not. Now, do I think it's way overvalued for the current market and it's going to keep coming down? It's a tough call. It's a really tough call. It's already fallen quite a bit. I think that there's going to be a lot more people currently in this market now who are going to, not want to part with this card at the current prices. There's going to be a lot more people who bought it at higher amounts who won't want to part with it unless, it gets back up to their prices, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But when we talk about something as being a good investment, we're not just talking about something staying consistent or flatlining. We're talking about something, outpacing your other options in the market. Now, as a collector, is now a terrible time to buy a card like this? It's a tough call financially. It depends on how much, and can you afford it or not? And it probably is fine. And it may end up ticking back up over the next few months, 6 months to a year to 2 years. It would not surprise me if it ticked back up 5, 10, 15% over the next couple of years. It would not surprise me if it ticked down another 5, 10, 15%. And I think that it's a random card I chose here, but it's a beautiful card. It's an important card in the hobby, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if you don't agree, you should never invest in anything that you don't feel that way about, that you don't see the value, that you don't feel the connection to. Now, be careful though, because your opinions, if they're just sort of your opinions or even other people's. Worst is when there's a lot of people's opinion. When a lot of people have very irrational opinions and are mimicking it to each other. And when I say irrational, I mean you feel like you love a card and you feel like it's the greatest card ever, but in 6 months you're going to change your mind. It's very unlikely I'm ever going to feel differently about this card because I've known this card for so long and I have many, many years of a relationship with this card. It's very unlikely my feelings about Pokemon as a whole is going to dramatically shift. And I'm going to one day wake up and look at all my cards and say, I hate Pokemon and I don't enjoy this. It's much more likely that your feelings are going to change about stuff that you've only known about for a very short time and you only have opinions about for a short period. Okay. So that's very important. Now you could have even stronger positive opinions for stuff you've only known a short time. So there also can be modern things and ultra modern things that are undervalued because in 4, 5, 10 years, people's opinions are actually going to become more positive about them. And these are things that, you have to make an assessment of that, but be careful because your own opinions are highly speculative and subjective when they're not based on any numbers. It's why it's so important to study other hobbies and to figure out, okay, were there middle generation modern stuff that was printed this much in this other hobby that stood the test of time and became very expensive. And you should do that research yourself. I try and encourage people. So, going back to this, right? So it's what the value of this could be this could be worth a large number of prices, right? It all depends on how many people out there want it and how much excess income they have. And that's what you're thinking about. And that's what you're doing in your value assessment. Now, how do we predict that? Well, we study other markets, as I said. Next thing we do is we look at pop reports. We look at the difficulty to pull this. We look at how hard is it going to be for more of this supply to come on the market. We're looking at that supply side first. Talked a little bit about that demand side, which is tricky to predict, but now we're going into that supply side. Okay. And then we talk about how many people do we think know about this card? How many people are showing this to people and saying and putting this in front of people for people to have a chance to be like, oh, that's really cool. I want to collect those. I would argue a card like this relative to a number of recent cards is pretty freaking awesome. And this would be way more expensive for you to pull yourself from a pack and is way harder to grade, et cetera, et cetera. So this is where my sort of value assessments start going in. And this card is not being shown in videos that are getting 4 million views right now, or 3 million views, or 2 million views, a card like this. Okay. So now all of that stuff can either make this undervalued or can make, or this could be like more appropriately valued probably for a while and stay at this price. And the stuff that's getting the most attention and the most heat could potentially then be overvalued. So that's how I would make these types of valuations. Now, the next thing you want to think about, if you're really long-term investing in something, do you think the Pokemon hobby is going to grow over time and become bigger? Do you think the Pokemon hobby, do you think that there are going to be people who have more money than they do now, who are spending more money than they do now? And where do you think that demand is going to go? And what cards is it going to go into? Because it's a very difficult thing to predict. And you have a situation where there's going to be more and more product constantly coming out. So there needs to be more and more money flowing into the hobby all the time to just keep prices up across the board, unless like all of the modern stuff completely crashes and all the money just stays in the vintage stuff. And so because of that, over time, you're fighting a tough battle here. We all are fighting a tough battle to have our collections continue to increase. And this is why I went so hard in my last video to explain that so much of the thinking is very irrational right now, and is based on just sort of people mimicking each other and then just seeing prices go up on things and then saying that means that this is going to go up forever, and that means that it's a better value and a better value and a better value. When in reality, it's very likely. So here's a situation, right? Like they're going to keep printing new cool cards. They're going to keep printing new awesome things. Like we already have this new set and people are freaking out over the Arcanine and the Gyarados, which are like gorgeous cards, right? They're adding in new rarity tiers, new things that are beautiful, right? More and more money needs to go to those cards. Where is that money going to come from? Where's that money going to continue to come from? Is it going to continue to come from people's pockets? Is it going to continue to come? And then if you're buying an item as an investment, who in the future is going to be willing to pay more for it? Who is that intended person? Because these are non-productive assets, the only way to make money is to buy something at a price, and then find someone who's willing to sell it more, willing to buy it for more from you. If you understand that, you will be way ahead of the game, I think, generally speaking. And it's why I don't think that these items are particularly investable and that the risk reward is particularly good, and why I push so hard that items like this, really good collector items and collector pieces to slowly build. But me personally, I don't think the risk reward makes sense, that there's going to be some sudden unexplained surge in prices and some sudden unexplained humongous amount of money that's going to be able to move all of these things. Now, that isn't necessarily true. We could have whales. I mean, the Pokemon market is still small enough that even these cards, a card like this going for, I don't know, $200, $225, maybe $150, maybe at the low, and, a card like this going for around $3,000. If you add up the market cap, which I'd done in Patreon for one of the monthly lives, I market capped and added up everything, not everything, but many sets and many key cards from these sets. They were all less than altogether. It was less than just the 1986 Michael Jordan rookie card from basketball, which shows you that if Pokemon continues to become a global force, and if Pokemon, continues to age, and we all age, and we have more expendable income, there is a clear path where this stuff could be a lot more expensive. If you can see it in those hobbies, it could happen in this hobby. But then you have to say, is Pokemon and Pokemon cards going to be bigger than basketball cards? One. And two, is the basketball market extremely overvalued, and is that going to tank versus the Pokemon market maybe being at a better spot? And these are just very difficult questions to answer, and they should all go into your risk analysis. And if you're being a serious investor, you want to get things that you feel like are really undervalued, have really as low risk as possible, and have as much upside as possible. And so, although I wouldn't call these items awful investments, you're throwing your money away, I would not call them serious investments. Okay. And that's what I was trying to get in the last video. Now, when we talk about, I have a lot of doubts about people who are buying sealed booster boxes and I'm just going to be very blunt in this video. I have a lot of doubts, and part of what worries me about the hottest part of the market right now, which is probably sealed booster box investing. I think what this stuff has going for it is that people like me who are talking about most of these items are saying things like, they're great, they're wonderful, but be careful. And these things have come down in value a decent amount and continue to slightly trend down or slightly trend up, but trend within a range. And that psychology causes people to avoid these types of items. So these items right now are actually in a much better place than a lot of items, because speculators and flippers are leaving this part of the market and they're putting money into modern booster boxes. There's a lot, I think the majority of people who are buying modern, or not the majority, I think a lot of people who are investing in Pokemon, probably the majority of people currently who are investing in Pokemon, are buying a lot of sealed. And I think because of that, and because it continues to work, it's lots of irrational pessimism about sealed boxes right now. So I don't know if that's a joke or not, but if you go to any, type in top 5 investments, every investment video that is on YouTube is about buying modern product and modern sealed product that I've seen. I watched maybe a few hours of content, and all these videos has 15,000 to 25,000 views, and all of the comments in it are I agree completely 100%, and it's all people who are buying sealed product. My concern with all of that is who is going to want that product at a higher price? If everyone is buying it, and again, this is thinking as a value investor, right? This is not thinking as a momentum investor. This is not a flipper, right? I bought sealed a bunch of modern sealed product and made a lot of money on modern sealed product because I flipped into the momentum of the market. Okay. And the risk reward was good when I was buying Chilling Reign at 78 and Evolving Skies at 95, as I've talked about. That's very different. I wasn't investing in them though. I think that one area of the market that's dangerous is you have a lot of people who are, I believe, who are buying modern seal to invest and putting it away in a closet, and they're going to be looking for someone else to buy it because they actually don't want those items and at those prices, and they probably won't open them because they're quite expensive. Now, it all depends on the price. I think when you're talking $100, $110, $120, there's probably a lot more people who are buying those items who would be like, I don't care if it goes down, I'll just open it and that's fun. And you may have a number of people who are even buying like Evolving Skies booster boxes or like $300, $400, $500 boxes at those prices. And so to open because they really enjoy it. Or if it goes down, I'll open it and have that sort of attitude. I feel like there's less and less truth in that as you start getting up to $1,000. When we saw Evolutions, when we saw a lot of people saying that Evolutions was going to go from 1,000 to 2,000, a lot of people making those videos were everywhere. This is going to go from 1,000 to 4,000. This is, these types of claims. It became a situation where it really got stuck there because who wants that box to open when the cards are worth about $80 out of it on average, or $120 out of it? Who's going to open $1,000 box when you're getting $120 cards? And like, the best card you can pull has like a 3% PSA 10 rate. And if you pull that, it's the only card basically that can make you money on the set. And you have to get a PSA 10 on it. Something like an Evolving Skies right now has much better value because there are a number of cards in it that in a PSA 10 can actually make you quite a bit of money. So it's much easier to understand how an average person would see value even at $300 in Evolving Skies. Now, I do also think there's a lot of people investing in it, and that's dangerous. Whenever you have lots of people investing in something, it pushes up the price higher than the actual collector demand is for it. That is what forms bubbles. That's what happened on these. People were not buying this card because they enjoyed it and appreciated it at the price they were buying it. They were buying it as an investment, and they were afraid to miss out. It can happen in anything. Nothing is safe. It's not a modern vintage thing. It's a sort of where is the bubble? Where is more of the irrationality? Where is more of that investing mindset where people are buying something for investment rather than buying something to enjoy, collect, and open? And that's for people to decide. If you feel very strongly that the vast majority of modern product is being opened and will continue to be opened, and that it'll and that then that's a sound that's a sound position to then invest in it or continue to invest in it and be like, you know what? There's just so many people who love opening Pokemon. These are still the cheapest sets basically to open. It's your cheapest options. You don't have other options, and they want to keep opening Pokemon. They don't want to wait for more sets or for prices to come down. And so they're willing to pay these high prices. And I think they'll continue to. The problem is you're just going to have more and more boxes. And it does seem unsustainable to me. Where is the money going to keep coming from for these Arcanines and these Gyarados and these new products and all of the different product lines and all of the different printing? There will come a time where it will stop working and where prices will become stagnant or probably reverse, just like what happened in a lot of the vintage market. What worries me is people saying things like, well, it's always sealed product always goes up. And it's only always gone up from this moment. It's not always gone up from a few years ago when most of the market, a lot of X and Y boxes were negative returns. You could have held them for 4 years and you lose 35% of the value after shipping and fees. Okay. So you have just be careful with those dynamics, understand those value assessments. I can definitely not predict the future. If Evolving Skies could go to 600, could go to 1,000, and it would for one of two reasons. Either it continues to be a set that everyone really loves and continues to open, and there are people out there who continue to want to open it at 400, 500, 600, 700, or it's being bought up and pushed up and continues to be pushed up by investors, and you're going to get to a point where there is no greater fool at sort of the end of that FOMO investing line. And the people who are investing in these products don't actually appreciate them and enjoy them and would never think of opening them at those prices and are just buying them because they've been told and parroted by other people that stuff always goes up. Do not buy something that you don't understand. Okay? If I can leave this hobby with one lesson, assess things yourself, and whether you assess modern sealed and you think it's the best investment, you assess vintage sealed, you assess middle gen sealed. There are very real reasons why sealed product it can be a better investment than raw or graded, and there are very real reasons why raw and graded can be a better investment than sealed. And anyone who doesn't see that hasn't dug deeply enough into this market. Because, I can tell you that I tend to make the most money and make my crazy, 30, 40, 50x returns on value investing in raw and graded because the market tends to miss those things the most. Everyone is aware of these new modern sets. And so they're most likely to be priced accordingly to whatever the market currently thinks about them at a time. It's hard for them to dramatically shift in value without some sort of news. It's harder, let me put it that way. With niche rare things that people don't know as much about, the world's promos are the best example of those things. Stuff I'm collecting in other hobbies. I collected these Disney cards from the 1930s that have 10x'd in value basically with Lorcana coming out over, people are now going back to the first ever Disney cards that I bought, a lot of. And these are very rare items, very difficult to find items. My 1966 Batman cards have doubled. My Superman cards have tripled, over the last couple of years. There's a lot of stuff that is very rare, has great IPs behind it. Now that is not, this card is highly optimized and highly known. This card is just because something is vintage does not mean it's the same as all vintage, right? This card is a card that is, yes, you are a big part of the reason why I'm going into this. And if you just got here, definitely go listen back to the beginning as I kind of walk you through a thought process. All right. So what you really want to do, obviously, around all of this is know all of your info, know your price history, because doing a little bit of, I don't do graphing, in terms of like, I've done occasionally, I've done a little bit of calculus in terms of like the rate of change and is that increasing or decreasing when I'm trying to predict when to sell my Evolving Skies booster boxes and when to like try to get, sell into hype at sort of the top. I try my best to kind of try to predict that based on math. But it's just very unpredictable. These types of things are really, really tough to predict. But so going on to Pokemetrics for pop reports, PSA website for pop reports, it's good to double check Pokemetrics, particularly if it's a really high value card. I find, looking at for raw stuff, really, really looking at TCG Player, seeing how much of that stuff is listed, seeing how much of it's selling. All this type of stuff will inform you about what the current market thinks about things. Now, your job as a value investor is to think, oh, the market is overvaluing this or undervaluing it. People who mimic others and just do what other people are doing are the ones who are making the value investors wealthy. It's the reality of how these, so those people make two people wealthy. They make the value investors wealthy and they make the savvy sort of momentum investors wealthy, who kind of jump from one thing to another and kind of buy it halfway up and then flip into the market. So hopefully that really helps people understand. If people have questions, I'm happy to take them on anything we talked about there, or if people want sort of more specifics. I'm not a channel, like I am not going to do your work for you and tell you these 5-10 cards are undervalued because of A, B, C, D, and to be frank, if they were really such good investments, why aren't the people just buying them? And it's because they're probably not that great of investments, most of them. And they know they can make more money by getting a bunch of views on their video, and then they can probably just buying those cards. I will make and have made so much more money. I could do this channel for 10,000 years probably and make way less money than I've made actually investing and actually doing value investing, which is why I'm not going to do the work for people. But this should have really, you have to develop those skills and develop that rational thinking and you become an expert in a niche. Start with a niche within the market. Start with a few sets, then expand, then expand. I've been doing this now for 7, 8 years to the point where I can be fairly knowledgeable and engaged in all areas really of the Pokemon market. There's some that I know a lot more than others, but I know every area pretty much, particularly certainly of like the main like actual TCG. The non-TCG Japanese stuff, there's still stuff I'm learning all the time. And I see cards and people ask me, do you think this is fake or not? And I'm like, it could be a Zendikar, it could be a fake. I'm not sure the foiling looks real. There was so much stuff that was printed with Pokemon on it. And it's like of that type of stuff. But and then the more you can be sort of an expert or knowledgeable broadly in the Pokemon market, that will really help you to be more of an expert then in the area you're particularly an expert in, because it allows you to compare and contrast to figure out because the overall market and the movement of the overall Pokemon market is very important in any niche that you're investing in and engaging in. Because it will tell you sort of the overall health and momentum of the thing as a whole, because everything generally is connected within the market. If modern continues to do well over time, vintage will likely continue to do well. If vintage continues to do really well, modern will continue to do pretty well. There are things that are going to become untethered from each other and move around like crazy, but yeah. So Nicholas Shaw is very confident that in 25 years, Evolving Skies will be like base set. And I would say that's a very, 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 very poor odds of that happening. But you and I will never be able to solve that debate like that. Like I would argue, right, that like, give me an example from any other hobby that had a set 25 years into it that became the most important set or the most important collectible item ever. You would definitely not be able to come up with one. And to be fair, the only potential examples might be from some sports. So for example, like Mickey Mantle in the 50s is more expensive. Some of those Mickey Mantle cards are more expensive than your, T206 cards. But that's a very different thing. It's because Mickey Mantle's like the most famous and most popular player. It would be like Evolving Sky. It'd be like the Sword and Shield era, like Zacian and Zamazenta become the 2 most popular Pokemon of all time somehow. And then base set of Sword and Shield and those gold cards become some of the most valuable cards in the hobby. That would be the comparison. There is no comparison of like I hope people understand that. It feels fairly obvious to me. The other thing I would add to it is like the one difference in sports and the one reason that can change is if you have extremely rare serialized items. So, items that are so much rarer in like your new generation stuff than stuff that was printed before, that stuff could end up becoming certainly more valuable than the stuff before. But as far as like all things being equal and the pop reports being equal and the amount being equal, I think that's a really poor bet. But I respect your opinion, Nicholas. I hope you respect mine. Like, I hopefully I gave some sort of an argument there that makes sense to people. And I go more off of history than I go off of like, certainly not your opinion, no offense, or anyone else's opinion. I trust my opinion, as you should trust your own over mine or anyone else. Let's see. I think you said Pokemon isn't in a great place right now to invest last video. So is it worth it to dig into the data right now? Yeah. I mean, so I don't think most people are here fundamentally to invest. In fact, I would think almost no one is. I think most people are here because they want to collect and it's fun and it's enjoyable and they still want to buy, but they want to know, should I wait? How long should I wait? At what prices should I buy things? And then how do I build a collection for the cheapest I can that will hold some decent value over time? Because that changes their value assessment. Like, how many people would buy this card at 3,000 if they knew that in 5 years it would go to 1,000? Not many. There might be some, but those people are probably multi-millionaires who don't care, and they don't want to wait 2 years to own the card, right? So value isn't there's value in getting the card immediately and getting the card you want and having 2 more years to have it in your collection. And so value is not just a financial value, right? It's a sort of an emotional experiential value for a lot of this stuff. And so you will have people buy things in this market even if they think it will go 5, 10, 15%, because they really want the items, and they would prefer to have the items now. And of course, nobody knows what's going to happen in the future, and they could go back up. They could steadily go back up. And to assess how many people in the world would buy this at $3,000 is impossible. I think to assess how many people in the world would want this at 500, with Pokemon being the IP, it felt more obvious to me that it was undervalued there. At 3,000, it doesn't feel nearly as obvious to me. And again, but to have any degree of certainty in that is tricky. Hopefully that's very helpful though to people. So I will invest in things like I'll buy modern product to open and lose money on. I will collect things or invest in things because I enjoy them, and for my time, it's an investment of my time. It's an investment of my money and my resources to have an experience and to have fun and be entertained. I'm not viewing it as the same thing as my stock portfolio, which I can assure you, my stock portfolio does not bring me any joy. I'm doing it to make money. I'm not like proud of owning these, and it's not particularly fun. If anything, it adds more grief to my life to constantly manage and check and move things around. It's for the money. Exactly, Mr. Bogey Dragon, and including myself, by the way, right? Like, now I also enjoy investing, and so years ago when these items were cheap, as I was explaining in the beginning, I had that investment mindset, and so I bought way more than I would have just as a collector. I bought way more of it than I would have if I didn't think it was going to go up. If prices had never gone up and they had all been the same, I would have made a mistake from what I was expecting. Now, though, I'm not buying because I'm thinking things are going to stonk up, at least in the short term, at least in the next few years. I'm buying and adding things to my collection because I can afford them and I really enjoy them and appreciate them. And that's a very different mindset. And still, to be honest with you, Mr. Pokey Dragon, I haven't bought anything expensive. I haven't really bought any Pokemon too much. There are a couple of things that got undervalued from like middle gen stuff. I haven't bought any WotC stuff in a long, long time, years, like at least a year and a half. I bought a jungle item, but also, and this is what I always said to people when they were asking for my advice, I would say that what I would do might be different than what you would do. And what I would say is, like, if I already made so much progress on all of these sets that and I'm interested in so many other TCGs and CCGs from a value perspective, I would rather put my money in some of those other things while I feel like Pokemon is totally expensive and hot. But there's so many people who they don't want to not buy anything for 2 years just because it's going to go down 5, 10, 15%. They want to own the item and enjoy the item. And that's very reasonable. What I don't like, though, and what causes damage in the long run to the prices and to people's enjoyment in this hobby, the more speculative people are and the more people are investing and not collecting, the more bubbles will form, the more bad time people will have, and the more people will leave and have bad experiences in the hobby. If price is steadily kind of climbing because more collectors want the items and actually hold them and can afford them, is what is healthy for the hobby and what will grow the hobby in a sustainable way. And you just want to ask that: do you feel like we're there yet? And we might be there in certain areas of the market. I would argue that areas of the market that have, some areas that have come down 60, 70%, in particular, of really key good items where there's not much more supply coming on the market, those have the best chance of probably being the most stable and the most sort of and maybe even undervalued, because there's so much there's sort of an irrational negativity towards them. Again, if you look online, every invest in Pokemon video that I've seen I haven't seen a WotC card or any sort of vintage card being recommended by an invest video in so long, and they were filled with them during the hype. if that doesn't tell you that you should they're probably all wrong. Like these people are probably following money and following, when something does bad, they say don't invest it. Or when something goes down, they say don't invest it in it. And when something goes up, they say invest in it, which is actually the exact opposite often of what you should be doing, as long as both items are really good. So like there's an item, there is a price point where I would be investing in the Moonbreon and where I would be investing in Evolving Skies. For me, my investing / like flipping wasn't really long-term investing, but my like shorter term flipping was like $95, and it got to 95 and I bought a bunch. Like there is a price. Like I think alt arts are some really good cards, and there's a price point there where I would be buying into it, particularly if I felt like if the negativity really swings harshly against those in the next few years, which it could, which will be hilarious. I mean, part of me really hopes that doesn't happen, because who wants anyone to hate cards? But it would be really good for people psychologically to experience that, because it would be hopefully an ego buster for a number of people. That they can predict that, I think sometimes understanding how little you know and how little you can predict and demand, and how much better looking at history is than your own opinions, like that's a really important lesson to learn as an investor. There have been plenty of times like that I was frustrated with like Berkshire and Hathaway, which I've owned. I have owned a ton of that stock since I was 14 years old, and it's been my best. It's been an unbelievable performer. It's outpaced the way outpaced the market. But there were periods, sometimes 8-year, 9-year, 10-year periods of like momentum growth, where even I, with my like temperament and my value investing, was frustrated with him that he wasn't buying more things. And then lo and behold, you see, this is something I talked a decent amount on the show, but you see, what I knew rationally was like ARK Invest and Tesla and all these things were going to implode, and crypto was going to implode, not because these things are bad, but because 95% of people buying these things were just mimicking other people and they didn't understand what they were buying, right? Like I knew that, but I still emotionally felt frustrated that Warren Buffett wasn't finding good deals and that it was underperforming these, flash forward a couple of years later, now Berkshire Hathaway is overperforming, is performing better than, something like ARK Invest, even over the last 3 years, despite that insane, growth that they had at one point. So it's very important. You are going to miss crazy momentum movements and things that honestly don't make sense, because you're not buying things. There's always going to be an item or a thing that booms really high because people are mimicking each other and people are telling each other how great it is and people are stonking and trying to make money. If you want to invest in that item, you need to be early, and then you need to actually sell into the hype. Most people are late and then sell at the bottom. It's just the reality. There are very few people who are able to buy it towards the bottom and then actually have the ability to flip and sell. Because a lot of those people, for example, a lot of people who bought Evolutions, at $300-400, for example, and held it to $1,500, it got to $1,500 at one point. They thought it would go to $3,000 to $4,000. I doubt that very many of those people actually sold when it got to $1,500, and it coming back now to $700. Now they still have made profit and they still have done well, but the vast majority of money that went into that product at the 1,000. So most people and most actual dollar bills have lost money on Evolutions, even though it's only come down so much, because generally the majority buys at the top. So these are really important things to understand in finance, and ignore the I told you so's. Like ignore people who get very high and excited and talk about their wins a lot as proof that they're really good at this. Shows that likely, well, it can be insecurity, but it also means that they don't understand how much luck was involved in it, randomness, and they're not really, it's not all the time true, but I think there is a decent correlation between those people and then not being able to like actually sell into the higher price, because they think, well, I'm such a genius, I picked such a winner, I just want to hold this winner forever, instead of just like selling into that hype that is there, trusting your rationality, because you won't want to sell. Everyone here says that, not everyone, but plenty of people say, oh, I predicted the Moonbreon when nobody. The reason Evolving Skies got to $95 and Chilling Reign and all these things got to $68 is because for a month, people in the modern investing Pokemon world thought the sky was falling and thought it was over. And there was content coming out and emotions coming out that was extremely negative. And that's when I bought. I capitalized on sort of that negativity, that momentary negativity, right? You can do that in modern, you can do that in vintage, but when everyone is very positive and mimicking, generally speaking, I try to avoid that. Okay. Absolutely, dude. Like if you're new to this channel, there's my first 100 videos, this channel is really about investing in anything. Um, uh, it's not going to tell you what to invest in, but it's going to teach you or talk about important topics that's going to help you develop that value investing mindset that you're going to be able to then apply to other things in your life. And understanding the psychology of markets and how to not get affected by them. Warren Buffett talks so much about really having the reason I feel like I can be successful is because and this pisses people off, is because I'm so stubborn in my analysis and I'm so unaffected by other people's emotions, in terms of my rationality and analysis. I just sort of, I go back to the numbers and I say, you can think whatever you want. Prices can get to whatever they want. Some of these cards that I'm not investing in or sets investing could 20x perfectly fine with me. I feel very comfortable and confident that I'm going to make money in what I'm doing and what I'm investing in over time. And I feel like what I'm investing in is probably going to make a lot more money than those things and is certainly a lot safer. And if it doesn't, that's perfectly fine, because I miss something, and that happens all the time. It happens all the time. Evolving skies, just as Nicholas was saying before, evolving skies could theoretically become the next base set or the most popular set of all time, and the Moonground could be the most popular set of all time or card of all time. That doesn't mean that what I'm investing in or speculating in isn't also going to do really well. In fact, it probably will. So trying to get very focused on like what is going to make you the most money versus just like what's going to be solid and reasonable, can also get you into trouble. Posture says, Jake, do you think we will have another boom like in 2020? And I know we're having a number more people are joining the chat now. I would really encourage people to go back and listen to the first part of this where I really addressed the main topic. Now we're going to go into questions. It's the one unfortunate thing about the lives that like most people tend to jump in an hour in, and then I've sort of already, talked about the topic. But Imposter X says, Jake, do you think we will have another boom like in 2020? Or is that a once in a lifetime event? The best thing you can do with a question like this is try and think about scenarios that could cause another boom, because booms don't just happen because they need to happen every 5 years. Like I feel like people say, like some people are just like, well, they've happened the last 2 5-year periods, so it needs to happen again in 5 years. And it's like, well, no, both of those happened because of unrelated Pokemon things. The reason that the booms happened were the pandemic and all the things associated with the pandemic and Pokemon Go, bringing lots of people back into Pokemon, lots of adults to Pokemon. Now, so what's another thing that could happen that would do that? Another huge video game that brings more generations into it, but again, I don't think we need a boom for things to drift up over time and for things to still go up in value, and for even some cards to go up in value quite a bit, particularly if they're not coming on the market a lot. Things like these vintage items, like that I'm talking about here, like an item like this, like if these really get into collectors' hands largely, and like you can't, like now I think there are probably like 4 of these listed on eBay. That's a lot, 4 to 5. Of a card that's pretty expensive. Like that's a sign that these are not all in like hardcore investor hands, that a lot of people still like invested and probably speculated on this. And so they're still looking to try to get out of it or recoup some money, or they can't really afford it. They don't really value it at the price. Right. And that's why a card like this might keep coming down, or a card similar to this. Once it hits a point though, where people like, where it's like, it starts disappearing into people's collections. And like, if this is only sold once a year on eBay, it's totally going to dramatically change the demand for this item and the value of this item. People will value this item totally differently. Now, this item is way more likely to achieve that than items that are a lot that there are going to be so many more copies of. Okay. Now, it's a supply demand thing that creates scarcity. What we're really talking about is scarcity. Right now, this item is not that scarce because there are 4 of them. Now it's scarce at $2,000. No one seems to be willing to sell it at $2,000, but it's not very scarce at 3,000, right? Um, an item like the Moonbryon is scarce at $500. There are none at that, or but there's 20 auctions a day, a week, 30 auctions a week at anywhere between 700 and 1,000. So it's really not scarce at that, at that price. Now, for an item to just be scarce at all, that's where you can see, items really, really drive up, where you have 2 collectors or 3 or 4 collectors who badly want to complete a set or badly want an item that they need for their collection, and they're willing to buy it. They could triple the market. You could see a sale that triples last sold in a situation like that. That's how crazy these items can move. Right now, we're still very much in a buyer's market where auctions tend to go quite low because there are a number of buy it now offers, and because people are rightfully being very patient. And there's probably some overly negative sentiment on this type of stuff that's also kind of maybe driving some of the prices a little lower than they may end up being in a year or two, once things kind of correct and the overall broader macroeconomic situation corrects. It's just very hard to know. Go at your question, like Investor Oak, like, yeah, video game, like a massive, like virtual reality video game. Like, I think like what was so cool about Pokemon Go was that you got to like go outside and catch Pokemon. And that was an experience you never got in the game. And it appealed to me in a way that none of the games ever appealed to, at least initially. That's why it connected. So like a virtual reality game where I can be in the world and walking around, and like, if it was really immersive and an amazing experience, I would 100% play that. And there would be tons of people play that game. And there could be a lot of new Pokemon fans, people who aren't that who never really got into it that much, who come into the hobby through something like that and eventually become huge Pokemon fans and start to develop nostalgic relationships. There's all sorts of people who are like 4 or 5 years older than us, for example, who I think could really get into this hobby. There are like card collectors who are spending tons of money on Marvel and Star Wars and other things, who are older and have lots of money. They just never grew up with Pokemon. So could there be, something that was so fun that it brought them? I don't know if we want to bank on, let's hope there's not another pandemic and, it's something like that doesn't cause it again. Oh yeah. Celtics are on a roll again. Isn't that an argument against sealed stuff? Rarely people buy sealed stuff for collecting, maybe to display. And I do think it's really hard to know. And this is certainly way more people now are investing in sealed product than ever before. But there could still be way more people who are cracking it, who are opening it and buying it to collect the cards inside and have the opening experience, than are actually doing it to like display, or, and I would say the display is a collection piece, or not display, like it's just in your closet, you're waiting for it to go open, you're going to flip it. Those are the ones that are most likely to sell. People who have just like closet, fulls of like booster boxes that they're not even looking at, those probably don't have that much value to them, particularly if the market started going down, or became very stagnant. But I think a positive argument for sealed, right? The common positive argument is that, well, there'll always be less of it because always more of it will be open, versus graded cards. There's always going to be more graded. It's true, but there may be so much more sealed and so much of it kept sealed, and it might get so high priced that it can still be extremely overpriced. I mean, we saw let's talk about vintage booster boxes for a second. You saw base set unlimited booster boxes selling for 35 to 40,000, and they've come all the way back to what, 15,000 or something. So maybe even less, some of the lowest sales. So that's a 6. So the same, that argument of like, well, there's less and less because more and more of it's being opened up, that matters for the supply side, but it doesn't mean that enough are opened up, or that there aren't way too many still of anything, that it shouldn't really be, at the current price. Although it is definitely a nice feature, and why sealed commands a premium, both for that reason and for the fact that you can open it and actually have the fun and the entertainment. I mean, that's massive. and that you can break it down, sell the packs, which can make it more affordable. I've made plenty of videos on this channel talking about how great investing in sealed product is at the right price. And that's what all this stuff is about. Rob Deep Bagger says, do you think one-on is driving a lot of price mania? It seems like people are buying on the secondary market and selling on one-on, creating extra amount. So someone has to be buying at the end of it, right, Rob Deep? So, you know, I think it's having these ways for like lots of, you know, middlemen to be making money or to be breaking down sealed product. Like the fact, like definitely the entertainment, like I 100%, and nor do I think if anyone predicted this, like bravo to you. Like you are really freaking probably very freaking lucky, but also like very freaking smart because I didn't even consider this. But this is also because I'm not super social media savvy, but I had no idea that channels like PokeRev were going to exist and happen, and that there was going to be all of this money to be made. I mean, you have channels like Royalty Gaming, like these guys, like Royalty Gaming, who may only have 20,000 subscribers. He's probably made $1 million, you know, by just coming every night, selling, flipping packs, like doing vintage box. Like there is so much money to be made and was made by people in who were breaking this stuff and doing breaks online. And this is my fault. Personally, this is something I did miss because I knew that in the sports world and I knew how much money breakers were making, but I did not think that was going to happen to this extent in the Pokemon market. And part of it's because I don't really understand it, and I don't really get much value from having a stranger open my packs as much as other people seem to. That isn't putting any of that down, because I do think like when you develop a relationship with a streamer, a lot of people, this is the way I talk about it, a lot of people do not have a community or anyone in their life to open cards with. They love Pokemon cards. They love it. But they don't have anyone to like root for them and cheer for them and enjoy the experience. And opening alone can be a lot less enjoyable for people than opening with a whole group of people. And if you open stuff on stream and you have someone who you find entertaining and funny and personable opening your packs, and then having lots of people cheer for you and watch it and be able to like engage and talk about it, like that adds so much to the experience. And that's very valid. Now you have to be careful about the sort of addiction element of that and people overspending and getting, absolutely. There's a lot of unhealthy stuff happening on these channels, like guaranteed, but there's also a lot of like healthy, happy stuff happening as well, in my view. Do I think they're making new Pokemon? Hopefully Pokemon knows. I certainly have no idea. I don't know what healthy would be. I guess I feel, I wish less people were investing in I think if anything is going to impact negatively the prices in the long term on a lot of this modern stuff, it's the fact that so many people are investing in it. And them printing more will make it less investable temporarily, which then might scare people or make people nervous. And then if they lower the print run, maybe people wouldn't like jump back into it so quick, and we'd have some more like healthy, fun sets that like drift up over time. I don't know. I think too, like getting kids involved, like some of these cards and some of these things are so expensive that yes, it's exciting for kids, but also how accessible is it? It's a big problem in like the Star Wars and Marvel communities where like the product is so expensive. It's just like kids can't even engage with it. That's awesome, Justin. Good to see you. Hopefully you're going to be in Orlando, man. I'm buying more vintage now since prices are down. Am I foolish? Should I be waiting? I thought I used the dollar cost average mechanic. Yeah. Are you buying it purely as an investment, instead of the stock market? And if you are you putting like money that you probably should be putting in traditional investments? Like I can't give anyone advice. All I can say is like what I would do myself. For myself, I would not be doing that. Like but if I have traditional investments, I have excess money, and as a collector, I think it's absolutely reasonable. I think it's totally reasonable, particularly if you're buying at good auctions, Juju. Like, and you know this better than anyone. Like, if you're buying a decent amount, like if you get something like in a really good auction, you could probably sell it for quite a bit more immediately if you wanted to take a little bit of money out, or you can hold that item for a while, keep it in your collection, enjoy it. And even if it comes down another 5, 10, 15%, like you're so good. you're still pretty good on it. I think the idea of the dollar cost average mechanic totally is reasonable in this scenario, in the sense that clearly there's not a ton of positivity around so much positivity around this stuff. Now, I do think there's a ton of positivity around Pokemon. And I'm still a little bit concerned about that. I just think we got way over our skis, this hobby, in terms of like how expensive these things got versus the amount of money actually in the hobbies. But I can say for myself, and I make a certain amount of money, right? And so for every person, it's going to be completely different. But in my personal situation, I would have been dollar cost averaging. I wouldn't, because I wouldn't be thinking of it so much an investment term, but I would be just really patient and nibbling at really good auctions over the last few years for key cards that I really wanted. If you've done that, you're probably good. Like almost nothing over the like after that like big 30 to 60% drop on most things. There hasn't been, I did a deep dive on my Patreon a couple months ago into this. There really hasn't been much in the vintage department, things that have really sold a lot that's gone down more than, 15, 20% more, in the last year and a half or so. There are going to be items, but overall, generally speaking, and then there's some items that have drifted up 15%. So, I've seen you here before, Blue Juju. You seem like a smart, savvy person. I would trust yourself. And again, I went through all that value investment, stuff in the beginning. I would do exactly what I did, but I would fill in the numbers yourself. Like I have my own opinions, but you being someone who's super engaged in the hobby and perfectly smart enough to do this. Like I don't know you. You could be a genius for all I know. But genius level IQ. But you're clearly a smart. You clearly have a pretty high IQ. I've engaged with you here. I've seen your questions, and this was part of my last video too. Like you are certainly smart enough to do your own value assessments, and as time, like the more time you spend in the hobby, the more you become an expert in more areas, the more ups and downs you see, the more you get a sense of the psychology. Like the more confident you'll probably be in your instincts. It's certainly good to listen to me and to listen to other people who are engaging in the space in a serious way, like 100%. But it's so important for you to understand it fundamentally. And two, well, one thing, Blue Juju, that I think about is there's price memory baked into a lot of this stuff. People who are newer into the hobby were not around at some of these lower prices. And the majority of the hobby was not around, I would say, at lower prices. And that can help the market stabilize a bit more, because I think that now I'm at the point where I'm totally happy to buy at like new prices if I think it's a good value. Like I'm not in the past in terms of that. Like I think these cards still have great value at their current values, and they're amazing cards, and they could go way up from here in a really long time. Certain items we don't know. I am not personally suffering from that too much, but I think there could be a certain degree of collectors and people who have that price memory of some lower prices, and just like they're just out of the Pokemon market forever. It's like once it went up a bunch, they're sort of just like, now it's just like I don't value it anymore, and I will never value it at those prices, and they're sort of stuck in that price memory. Although I think more of that was happening a year and a half ago. A lot of those people are probably already gone from the hobby. And like I know some of my best friends like are kind of gone from the hobby and are in like Marvel or other, some of my people, not necessarily best friends, but people in the hobby, but people who I really like and respect in the hobby. There are people who they would still probably be in Pokemon and really engaged and loving it if prices hadn't gone up so much. And now they're sort of doing other things that they feel like has better value. The arcade, Jake, who are your favorite Star Wars TCG channels? I'm interested in getting into the cards, but not really sure. I have not found any, to be honest with you. The arcade, I do like Frank something. They're good opening channels that do the Star Wars opening. There are no investment-y channels, from my view, that are seriously talking about value investing in these, and it's part of why I think that there's great opportunity. There's some really good opportunity there potentially. Who really knows? There's plenty of risk. How are they really going to become popular? There's all sorts of stuff, but I'm actively buying and engaging in a market like that, and I don't want to create. I would say you really need to do your own research and you need to make your own opinions. These types of markets are very are more speculative, less optimized. A lot of the buying and trading happens on Facebook. Go on Facebook groups. This is exactly what I did for DBZ Score, and why I was sort of able to get in at a good time and get good deals and et cetera, et cetera. I went in, I talked to the people who had been there a really long time, and I got the information directly from them. They told me the price history of items. They told me what was popular and what changed. There are interesting things you'll learn, like Hamel autographs have really outperformed. Hamel autographs used to be like quite a bit less than a Harrison Ford autographs. And now a lot of them are going for more, for example. Like, they're just interesting things that you'll learn, and people over time figure out like which ones are rare and, et cetera, and things shift just like they have in Pokemon. But there isn't a channel doing it, and it's against my own competitive advantage. Like, I've worked really hard to get, and I gave you a tiny thing there, but there's a lot of stuff, and I'm still learning. And just like in Pokemon, I spent 3 years sort of like lurking and listening and engaging and trying to learn everything. That's what I would suggest. Go into these Facebook groups, go and engage in the conversation and discussion, and just understand that like you're more like, I am more likely to make mistakes in that market than I am in the Pokemon market, because I know this market so well. The Star Wars market, I feel like I know quite well. And I do feel like my mindset and my sort of, I'm bringing in a lot of skills and that I think are going to be highly competitive there. But in terms of seeing things maybe in a way that other people don't see there, but there's tons of people there who have so much more knowledge than me and are aware of so many more things than me. And because of that knowledge gap, I may make mistakes. I mean, I saw really smart people come into this Pokemon market and make some pretty big mistakes because they didn't understand. Comment on comments are great. There were people who were buying like first edition jungle, EVs, for example. And they're like, well, it's the first ever EV. It has like the same pop roughly as like the first edition base cards that are going crazy. This card's way undervalued. And that card went all the way up to like, $800 or something, $600, $800. What they didn't know is that, I had 100, Dan and I just alone had like 100 of them to grid, and so many people had a bunch that they just never graded because there was never any reason to. There was not enough value, and so those flooded the market. And there were probably really smart people who had part of the information who lost a ton of money speculating or investing on that because they didn't know that. Now, serialized stuff really helps with that in Star Wars, because that like this is how many there are. There aren't going to be a ton hiding under someone's bed. But Alex P says, so it's stupid for me to not sell my case of Evolving Skies that I paid $660. I'm missing out on games. It's hard to tell. I'm waiting to see what happens. Yeah, I have no idea, Alex. Like, so I can tell, like, I only can say what I did. And I sold most of my stuff I sold a couple at 180, but I held most of it, and I sold the vast majority at around like 240 to 260. And I think it's like 300 now or something. I feel very happy and comfortable with that. And if it doubles again, I'll feel very happy and comfortable with it. That's part of why I'm comfortable selling. It really depends on your value analysis. Do you feel like it's going to be the greatest set? Do you feel like with new sets coming out, it's going to continue to hold? It's going to continue to go? I can't answer that. There's obviously like the reprint scare, and nobody knows how big that reprint could be, what would happen with that. A small reprint could reinvigorate people and get people excited and make more people interested in it again. These things are just really, really tricky. So I would be just like what people used to ask me about evolutions when it got to like 400, 500. And I used to say, you can go back and you can hear me say this over and over again. I said, with the momentum and the amount that are coming off of eBay, it could double again before it halves. Same thing I said with Moonbryon, right? Like, with these types of things, with this type of momentum, but then you just don't know how much of that is being driven up by like investors versus like people who are actually collecting and are actually going to hold it. Pick your poison. It's a gamble, just the fact that you're asking that question, you're thinking, I certainly would say you're not being stupid. I'm sure you're having these thoughts. And you have to decide and sort of make a positive, negative case, for each, obviously there's also always the option to like open it and sell some. I don't know if the cases are getting a premium or something that you want to keep it sealed. I don't know. I'm not, I don't know exactly what's going on there, but yeah. I told people though that I would have sold all my Evolutions boxes, except for one that I kept, but for $300 to $400, like that I would have bought them at 70, get out at 300 to 400. Hallelujah. I would definitely have not held to 1,000 personally. And so I would have missed out, but I knew and understood that it could do that. Right. And that is part of understanding sort of momentum movements and how sort of, quick these markets can move. But, you do want to do research, Alex, see how many are listed. If you see that there aren't that many listed on eBay at some of these prices, and you see it just continuing to tick up, you could ride it up a bit more, but you never know. You never know what can happen with doing that. So there were a number of sales actually for 1,500 and 1,200 and 1,300 that I know about, particularly overseas, but it did get up to that. But they weren't like through eBay or anything. They were just like, I know people like there were a few weeks there where people were talking to me and telling me and sending me. There were a lot of people doing openings and all sorts of things overseas. They were charging like, I think it was like $70 a pack or something. And people were buying it up like crazy. But it's similar to sort of the base set Charizard got to like 7,000, 6,500, 7,000, but there were really only a few 9s that were being sold at that. A lot of these things, similarly with like the Gym Challenge PSA 10 Charizard sold for $12,000 and then plummeted back to 6. Like, there were a few sales on a lot of things that were truly the peak, but yes, the general peak, particularly on English, was 1,000 to 1,200, on eBay type of thing. So if people could take a second to like the video, I would appreciate it. If you want to support me on Patreon, where I do a lot more deep dive analysis, that would be a great way to support me. If you can subscribe to my channel, I would really like to get to 10,000. That would just be a sort of a personal goal for me. I would really appreciate anyone who's willing to do any of those things or use my eBay affiliate link. And I will, keep giving out this, info for free and having these conversations for free with people, because I love and enjoy it. But that's a way you can help give back a little to me, a little more to me. How do I decide on a good entry point into Modern? So the same way I decide this, I kind of talked through my thought process. I used a couple of vintage cards, but you could do the exact same thing for Modern, right? I think the thing with Modern is it's even harder to do accurately. Like the same people who there were some that didn't, but the same people who largely there were people who said like the Vivid Voltage Pikachu was going to be the best card from Sword and Shield and invested heavily and pushed that card up to 1,000. A lot of the same mindset then was like, well, the art cards are amazing and they're everything that's cool and new, and like they'll kind of, and sometimes they'll be right, sometimes they'll be wrong. It's just very speculative to think that like you or I are going to know, first of all, what are going to be the coolest cards of an era, when the era isn't even finished, but particularly like what are going to be the coolest cards in the era in a really long time. So it's, and there's so many examples of things that were really liked. And then that, the demand shifted to other things. And then there were examples where people really didn't like something. And then later, level X's and primes were hated on for many years. And then, it shifted later that, those are some of the best performers, in terms of, actually going up in value, way better than almost anything. So um, it's just tough. So I don't know if I can say any more than I said. Go back and watch the beginning of this video on how I would think through all of that. What signs do I look for? I'm going to see if I can say anything else I haven't already said, but the longer a set has been out, the more irrational the negativity seems to be, the lack of attention that something gets. Like, those are things I look to invest in for long-term investing. So, I did some speculating and investing on like the break cards over the years, particularly the Lugia. That went up a lot. I did some speculating. I've recently done some speculating on rainbow rares from Sun and Moon. Those have not gone up yet. Those are still basically the exact same prices I was paying for them. We'll see if there's, I think that there could be, it may take some time, 3-4 years, 2-3-4 years for people to really start to miss those, start to like those. If Pokemon is strong, that's a lot more appealing, particularly when I'm getting, if the booster box is $1,000 and I'm buying a rainbow rare, which is extremely difficult to pull, from a set, to pull each individual rainbow rare in Sun and Moon, and I'm getting that already graded in a 9 for $20, and it's a pretty decent character, or for $50, in a 10, that seems like pretty good value, but like, it's certainly risky to know if people will want those in the future. And they may want some things and not other things. And just because people went back for every generation before, they've gone back and spent a ton of money on the key chase cards. The key chase cards are those rainbow rares from that period, and before, it's the primes and level X's, and like there a lot of these things were hated on, and then later on people went back and it didn't even matter if they were from that area or ever engaged in that area, people still wanted it. So could that happen again? Absolutely. But there's going to be a lot more rainbow rares than there were primes, than there were, it just becomes harder and harder over time. But you want to buy them when they're really down and when people are really negative. You do not want to buy them when everyone's saying they're great. I just can't say that enough. It's just over time, like, you may hit some winners, but you're going to lose probably with that type of mindset and strategy as an investor in general in life. 4 million new video from crazy. It's amazing how many people like watch him and watch his videos. Fame and social media is fascinating. Yeah, I mean, this certainly has always been my feeling, 777, but it doesn't mean that the hobby will really feel that way. That's a really hard thing to predict, but I think it's a risk. I think realistically, people could care about that set less and less over time rather than more and more, which is what people were positing on. But it's also possible that people could care more and more. There were a lot of people who paid quite a bit, who do enjoy that set, who were connected to it. It's just really tough. It's also just really tough because the cards are worth so little inside compared to the booster boxes. It's going to have a tough time. And there were so many people who said guaranteed to 4,000, just the same. It's the same crowd, They just sort of move on from one thing to the next. People still don't get why Evo is still expensive and hasn't dropped. And honestly, this fact just to me is pretty simple. Yet people still don't get why Evo still is expensive and hasn't dropped 70%. What's so simple? People want to open it because they simply can't afford WotC packs. It's just hard to have it both ways, of like that vintage is dying and no one's interested in vintage, but everyone loves to open vintage but can't open it because it's too expensive and they need to open. I'm just not sure I really buy, and I've never bought First of all, it's not vintage. There's nothing vintage about it. It's just the same arts. You can get those arts in celebrations. You can, they'll probably reprint it again and again and again. And so I just don't think that argument has a lot of merit. You seem very, very confident in that argument, with which I respect, and you seem to be kind of dug in, and I appreciate that. I mean, that's what I believe in. I think you should be, if you really believe it, and I'll be dug into my, opinion, which I think is very rational, and, that's okay. Yeah, I mean, Evo dropped, the same as basically like all those sets did from those eras. So it really didn't behave, to kind of go against your point. Like, it didn't really behave like the vintage sets. Like, the fact that the vintage went down so much, showing maybe a decrease in popularity of that, like, it behaved very similarly to like the other sets around the same time frame, in terms of falling, 30% or so in value. Some did better, some did worse, but I checked on it recently. People are still buying it. I mean, it's selling all the time. Evolving Skies is like being auctioned off, and people are buying it and selling it all the time. And although I don't hear about it so as much as I used to, I still do hear about it, and people saying it's going to go to 2,000 or 4,000. I still hear people saying that and parroting that. I appreciate that, AP. I think it'll be helpful to kind of, for people as well. Those are things I've talked about at times, but kind of going through the mindset and the thinking a little bit. And you've been a long time watcher and supporter of me. I really appreciate you, AP, for, AP is a smart person, and has a lot of comments that I always find interesting. To make it simple, if in the next bull market in 3 to 5 years, basic goes up again from 12K to 50K, I would be stunned if that happened. It would, again, we would need some massive crazy thing, and to my point, it's like, I don't, this magical sort of 3 to 5 years that things will just go up for no reason, is wrong. Often age actually can hurt hobbies. There's a misconception that people just think with age things will get more valuable. Age can really dramatically hurt a hobby if more people leave and they continue to just print more product. Like everything could get cheaper. So assuming, but okay, let's assume though that in 3 to 5 years, basic goes from 12 to 50K. How much do you think Evo will go up? In 2020, base went up 7 times while Evo went up 10. Yeah, I mean, Evo was able to probably go up more on a percentage basis than base set, pretty simply because people couldn't afford base set. And this is to your point, right? People can't afford base set, and they saw that as the next best thing. I don't really believe that a lot of people, like, I think that if all the influencers hadn't rallied around that set and pushed that set and talked about how great it was, because all these influencers who said how great it was a year or two before were saying, oh, another Evolutions pack. And now it's just, you see PokeRev, like you could go back and you can say, and Leonhardt, oh, another Evolutions pack. And now it's like, oh, great, another Evolutions pack. It was a dramatic shift in sort of the narrative and the presentation, and it follows the money, and then money follows the money, and it drives it up. It is what it is at this point. I certainly have talked that to death, and everyone's opinions are clear. I'm fine with it. Let's see. I want to make sure I'm not skipping questions here. I'm buying to invest and because I enjoy the cards. Yeah, this word invest is a tricky thing. It's like, when I hear invest, I think you got to be making like 8 to 15%, depending on your risk profile, and maybe even 20% a year if it's a super risky thing. As someone who is now in the financial investment world, and I'm an analyst for potential investments in real estate market and stock market. It's your discount rate, has to be pretty high, generally speaking. Discount rate being your sort of assumed, time value of money. So every year your money should be making you a certain amount, and if it's not, you're fundamentally losing. That's putting aside inflation or any of those types of arguments, but so I think everything I said, would stand, Blue, but you got to make those, decisions yourself, and it's not obvious what to do. You see a lot of people. That's not the one I want to do. You see a lot of people from the Magic world who are not buying Magic and LGSs and middlemen and all sorts of things, who are no longer buying Magic, and they're funneling that money into Pokemon because Pokemon's going up. That's causing it, though, to be overinflated. Like, that should worry you about investing into Pokemon, is more people are buying into Pokemon to make money off of Pokemon, and who are they going to sell to? Where, like, at the end of the line, are there enough collectors? And there might be more than enough for a while. And again, depending on the price point that you're getting at, like, it would be like particularly good sets if you can get them like at around, that 86, 90, 95, maybe even $100 price point. Like, they could be really good buys in this market for a while. I certainly am not against that, wholeheartedly or anything. I'm against the, like, the analysis that the fact that they're more expensive, they've gone up, is a negative. You're having to buy them for a higher price, and they're fundamentally the same item. I'm not sure how people don't see that. It scares me. Scares strong, worries me, because I care about you guys, and I care about the hobby. I don't want people to have a bad time. I want people to have fun and enjoy themselves and make money. And I understand that it's just not going to happen for everyone. My guide is if I'm investing 25% plus of my gross income a month and I'm still saving cash, spending my cards perfectly fine. Yeah, man. So many people and it goes back to what I was talking about in the beginning of the video, right? Like, you are buying things at values that, like, you are valuing them as a collector, and you can afford it. Like that, like, if everyone was sort of like you in doing that, the market would stabilize very quickly around low pop things, and it's very healthy. It's like a very healthy, you're just like enjoying the hobby and buying things that you appreciate. And you're probably, because you're on this channel, like trying to be market savvy, which I would recommend, because then you get more of a bang for your buck. But like, at the end of the day, you have a realistic, way of engaging with the hobby. I appreciate that, Imposter Oak. I work really hard to bring value, and it's nice when it's appreciated. It really is very nice when it's appreciated, and it's important, any content creators that you appreciate and that have helped you, in some way, that you take care of them too. Any thoughts on how soft some CGC prices have become in this slump? Fair amount of good deals to be had if you're buying the card, not the grade. Yeah, it's been a little frustrating for me, Wicked, because I'm actually been trying to sell only a few CGC slabs, and I have been struggling a bit to sell them. It was certainly always a possibility. I got these cards at such a good value. It's so under the market. And I thought I could sell them a bit closer to PSA than I'm actually able to sell them at. I'm still going to profit on them a decent amount, but I thought it was going to be a home run, and instead it's kind of being like a frustrating, like I'm making 20% on my money for like some frustration, and it's a lot of money, so it's still good because they're big cards, but it's going to take some time. I think one did sell today, which is good. But okay, but any thoughts on how soft some CG? Yeah, I'm not following CGC prices across the board or how CGC 10s specifically are doing now. It always seemed that on sort of the lower end, CGC and PSA were selling a bit closer together, or it wasn't so significant. And that makes sense. When people are buying a really high value card, first of all, most people are PSA collectors, that the collector wants their really high value card to match their set, right? Two, you want that card to retain value, and it's understandable why people would be more anxious or afraid to buy a card in a CGC slab if they don't believe that the CGC slab is going to fetch a price, or people are going to care as much about that grade. And it definitely puts more it can be a lot to ask of people to buy the card, and not the grading company. And is probably fairly unrealistic to some extent, and probably won't change. But as far as like getting good deals on them right now and buying a card not the great, yeah, I mean, you can do the whole Dan Catch 'em all collectibles thing, right? You can do the whole like optimize. Well, if I'm getting like a much cheaper value and the card in there is really good, and I'm able to get it for like half the price, that seems like great value, both as potentially a collector, and then also maybe to crack it out and regrade. I do barely any of that, but it gives you an option. It's something you can do it. Like if these CG slabs just really don't sell, I will eventually crack them. You're welcome, Juju. Thank you for the great questions. Good, Justin. I'm glad you're coming. Be good to see you. Oh, you said, you're going to try. Not good at, no, I'm completely joking. Collector cons are very expensive to go to, and they're very fun, but I definitely don't want to pressure anyone. Go to local, if they're very expensive, particularly if you're not vending. And so it's part of why I'm actually putting on a local event in the Boston area. It's going to actually be in New Hampshire, but fairly close to Boston. Not this weekend, but the following weekend. And it's why I encourage people to go to trade nights and start community around them, because collecticons are quite expensive, even though they're very fun. It's really a national event. It's a bit of a holiday. Non-sports cards is a good Star Wars card channel. Oh, thank you, Eric. I'll have to check them out. I don't know. I haven't heard of them. I've typed in before, like, Star Wars card investing and things like that. There's so many different types of Star Wars cards. There's your original stuff from like the 1977, 77 into like the, 80s, 1980. And then there's, your 96, there's some cool sets around then. There are, and then you've got sort of a bunch of your ultra modern stuff, and you've got autographs, and you've got, there's many years, there's many eras, and there's many different, and then that's only tops. And then you also have, Decipher, and you have, the CGC. You have a lot of, and then there are other Star Wars cards too, some of which Rafi has showed on my channel before. 100%. And that's why I'm very careful to talk about what I would do and why I would do it, which is hopefully the best way for people then to think, okay, how am I similar to Jake, or how am I different than Jake? And they can then make those more, me sharing things about myself, or you, Wicked, sharing things about yourself and your thought process will help others then be more thoughtful and think about themselves, which is the goal. So I'm going to go for another 15 minutes or so. And then I actually have a little bit of work that I need to do before going to bed for my day job. But as always, it's a pleasure, guys. Appreciate y'all. I see some Flesh and Blood boxes in the back. Do you have a decent sized collection? I don't actually. I have not gone heavy into Flesh and Blood. I literally have like just a. I think I have one of each box, but not like the most expensive one. Um, just as I like collecting, just as a collector to have one. Full speculation on Crown Zine. If you want my full speculation, 6 months till 5 years. Yeah, I don't know. I have no freaking idea, man. It's hilarious. Like people who are predicting what that set will do, like with any like seriousness, like that's so it's kind of just like crazy speculative. Like it could be in a huge amount of range. We have no idea how much Pokemon is going to print of that. We have no idea how many people are going to want those cards. We have no idea like which cards are going to be the most. We have some idea, but we're still getting a sense of the pull rates. Like it's just sort of like whatever. I think if you can, people seem to like it, people seem to be excited about it, but sometimes people really like something and they're excited and then they move on quickly and they're on to sort of the next thing, and then sometimes they're not. Sometimes it becomes the greatest set in history ever, people keep saying that to each other. So very odd people's and very unpredictable sort of what narrative people are going to sort of cling around. It's a ton of groupthink. These hobbies are a ton of groupthink. People not thinking for themselves and just sort of hive minding. So we'll do another 15 minutes. I have no idea what that sound is. What's up, Z? Good to see you. Z, I want to get you on the channel sometime. We haven't talked in ages. If you'd be willing to, it'd be fun. You Cam and I would love to talk to you guys at some point. I've been meaning to ask again. Now that you're less busy, you're making content again. There was a period there where you were like under mounds. I remember talking to Lauren about her showing me how many packages were in your car constantly. It just, yeah, it's crazy. You seem like you're doing well. I'm happy for you. I'm actually really happy for you, James. I guess I will say this publicly as well. Congratulations on the hiring people and the business growing and being able to give such great rates to people. You're a great guy. Cam's a great guy. Wish you nothing but success with it. I hope I can see you guys at some point at some of these cons. Let's see. Oh, Wilt did a $5 dono. Appreciate that, Wilt. I'm glad you're enjoying the lives, and just appreciate you coming, hanging out, and supporting me. It means a lot. No, they didn't get to that. What did I say? I think I said 35 to maybe 35 to maybe 40. Did I say 50? I don't think they got up that high. I think someone asked a question though about what if they got to 50K. But Jake, don't you see it's always some excuse people have on why modern sealed goes up? The influence of the pandemic, Pokemon isn't printing enough now. Many people are buying to keep sealed. Too many people are buying to keep sealed. It's some excuse. So I think like I would be careful with that word excuse versus like very reasonable issues and risks to it. And I think it's sort of the thinking that anything that's very reasonable and logical and rational but is against the way you think, or investing as an excuse, is a dangerous way to go about things, Alex. Eventually, it has to be seen as a proven pattern. So, yeah, it's just nothing works forever. There are no patterns that work forever, because anything that works really well always has the tendency to eventually get overinflated, because everyone sees that, everyone piles into it, which then causes it to there. Basically what happens, Alex, and like, I really wish you would just agree with me on this, because then I would be like, okay, we're making some progress. Like, we can, because like I talk a lot about how there are plenty of positive reasons, and that modern right now may not be overvalued. There are just some risks. But this concept or idea, I feel like, is really important, right, to get out there, which is that every single thing can become overvalued, and in fact eventually does, even really great things. And they have the tendency to do that because really great things attract a bunch of people, because they have good fundamentals, or they've had good success. People are attracted to the prices, people are attracted to the profits. Then that eventually overinflates it. As more and more people funnel in, it pushes the price up and up and up. And then you have a lot of people who chase that and then use that going up as a sort of like, well, it works, so I'm going to continue to do it. And then you have more and more people who don't take seriously the risks or the downside, putting more and more money into it. This is exactly what happened with Tesla, with crypto, et cetera, et cetera. You can have a good thing. You can have a thing that's that is undervalued, or that has good fundamentals, or that, whatever, but the psychology of it. Now, I'm not saying that at $120 or $110 we're at that point. You just have to, like, and this is my frustration, is like, and Alex, like, every channel is just saying that it's all guaranteed. So nobody is saying, like, almost no one is saying what I'm saying. I'm in the vast minority. The only people who think that I'm in the majority are people who only watch like a couple of channels and hang out on like maybe E4. So anyway, I'm not going to talk about it anymore. I've been very clear, and hopefully it's very helpful to people over time. Okay. Thoughts on Lorcana. Are you collecting or investing in it? Disney has a huge opportunity. It's all going to depend on price point, on how cheap I can actually get the product when it comes out. It's all too expensive for me. Like the vintage Disney has gone up a huge amount in value, like from like the 1935 set, and even some of like the French cards. But I still think like some of that stuff feels like better value than like the stonking that's going on like these. But like, I don't invest in stonking, hyping like stuff. And it doesn't mean that those cards are going to go down at all. Those ones that were like given out, that they're only like 1,000 of each, but like there's certainly a lot of risk, and to figure out like what those should be worth is anyone's guess. That's what kept me out of the Star Wars market. There's nothing insulating these sets from future cards. These aren't rookies. Yeah, I mean, I'd say the same thing, right, about Pokemon. It's the same situation. There are rookies of these cards with a serialized, with this pattern, with this type of set. Like there's a rookie of Masterwork, which is like the key top set. Similar to like there's the first ever there's the first like stellar autograph, some of the key properties. There's the first, like in Marvel, there's the first PMG or whatever. But I do think you have to be careful with that stuff, because really the first one is from the 1977 one for a lot of those characters. But the rookie like Mando stuff, like the new characters that are coming in, like I bought a bunch of like the Baby Yoda and Mando and like some other things for like super cheap that are their rookies, or within their first year, that are like rookie first year, first appearance type stuff, because they are coming out with new characters. So that are, Disney's plowing so much money into all of these universes and franchises. Like we're just at the beginning of Star Wars. Star Wars is like, they have told so little of the Star Wars canon story. It's all focused, just around sort of like the main characters and the main families. But like, there's like, with Ahsoka, and they're going to start getting into characters like like Thrawn, which is like an incredibly interesting character where they might end up being a huge hit and then making a bunch of movies and other TV shows about Thrawn. Like it's just the beginning. And all of those types of characters potentially will have, rookies, first appearances that are more modern. So be interesting to see over time. Appreciate you, Gerald. Thank you. No, like this is wrong. They have not worked forever. Gold has been around for a long time. The S&P 500 in America has not been around for that long, and 100%, if America starts decreasing in value overall, or American companies start, like if what happened in Japan or many places around the world ever happens here, you will see it get destroyed or just flatline and not go up. So these things have not worked forever, and there are reasons why some things work for a very long time and other things don't. So no, definitely not. And like that doesn't make any sense, right? Like and eventually there's going to be like not like part of the reason why a lot of these things have gone up is in the increase in the overall population. Now that the population numbers aren't increasing, these things can't, like it doesn't, you get how like things can't actually increase forever, right? Like fundamentally, just by math. Whatever. And again, it's not to say that modern sealed may not end up being a decent buy right now. Like you don't have to make, like it's that people are pushing against, the irrationalness, the extremeness of the message. And again, you're in the majority of people right now, Alex, which should scare people. If you go online and you go on and type in top 5 investments, it'll be all modern videos with everyone in the chat saying the same type of stuff. Well, it always goes up. Just hold. Should I sell? Should I take profit? No, just hold. It always goes up. It's like this weird echo chamber. It's strange. And now is the worst time to buy gold in human history. Yeah, I mean, also like, will gold be replaced by Bitcoin over time? Will gold be replaced by do we need gold? Are there's going to be, or is digital gold going to be better? Some other store of assets similar to that over time. Like, you just never know. Now these things have been around for a lot longer and are potentially more stable than something like Pokemon, but whatever. Okay. Again, and what could happen, not what has and is happening. I don't know what to say. It feels like intentionally. It's fear mongering. So saying facts, like articulating very calmly facts, is fear mongering. That's scary. Like if people feel like I'm fear mongering, like it's scary. Now, Alex, like if you really believe in modern sealed, like fully, every person that's like me is helping your investment because we're actually getting more people to not buy in it, et cetera, et cetera. And I would not say I'm against modern sealed. I buy quite a bit of it, but like anyone who is, and I don't know who these people are, I've yet to meet any of them that are just fundamentally say modern sealed can never go up and you can't make money. It's just you're just creating straw men. I'm taking the bait right now. I'm gonna not take the bait. Okay. Okay. And the truth is like, I really like Alex and I are friendly. Like I really like him. And but I'm just not willing to have the conversation anymore, Alex, because I just feel like I'm talking by you and you're not hearing me. And I respect you, have your opinions. Let's please not go back and forth. Please, and please don't like mischaracterize my opinions. It's so frustrating for me. Okay. Okay, good. I'm glad we're good. I just the last thing I want is any drama with anyone. I just I just want to have fun. Okay. Um Anyway, I think I will end it there because it has been 15 minutes. Really appreciate all of you guys. The Jazz situation. I have not. We can maybe talk about it in the future. I don't really have anything to add to it, Pikachu. I don't really know exactly what's going on. I'm not the best person to talk about it because I don't have a lot of the specifics. Anyway, really appreciate all of you guys. As always, I love doing this stuff. It's super fun. And I'm continuing to figure out ways, to kind of continue to try to bring value and be a positive for the people who listen and the people who are in the community. So I will keep at it. And again, if you guys can support me by doing the Patreon thing, by clicking on my eBay affiliate link, or by signing up for or by subscribing to the channel, it's greatly appreciated. All right. I will, in a week from now, I will have my, with Nick, Old School Pokemon, and Dan TCG. We're going to be doing our game, trade night, excuse me. And then we've got CollectorCon coming up, and got Dan's presentation at the end of the month for Patreon, which I'm sure will be good. And that's it for tonight. All right, everyone. Take care.